Arlen's first thought upon waking up was that someone had swapped his brain out for a lead brick. His second thought was that he was pretty sure he'd been asleep long enough for any hangover to have worn off, so what the hell was this throbbing? Opening his eyes was like trying to split an atom with a spoon, painful and ultimately pointless. But when he finally succeeded, the sight did little to comfort him. The room was dark, save for a strip of dim lighting running along the ceiling. It was like someone's half-arsed attempt at ambience. Arlen groaned, rolling off the slab he'd been laying on, and promptly introduced his face to the cold, hard ground. "Welcome to consciousness," he muttered to himself, voice creaky as an old door. Population, 1 idiot and a headache. Arlen flopped onto his back, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. Was it too much to ask for a skylight? Maybe a motivational poster? Hang in there, with a picture of a cat clinging to a tree branch. The sound of movement from somewhere nearby snapped him out of his existential pity party. He squinted into the shadows, trying to pick out shapes. "Who's there?" he called, voice sounding more confident than he felt. Years of faking bravado were finally paying off. "Calm down, Arlen, it's just us," a voice replied, its tone 1 part soothing, 3 parts sarcasm. "Us?" His brain, sluggish from what felt like centuries of sleep, finally kick-started. Gradually, 3 figures emerged from the shadows. 3 people, all distinctly human, looking about as confused and disheveled as Arlen felt. "Well, isn't this a reunion?" Arlen said, pulling himself to his feet with all the grace of a giraffe on roller skates. "Any of you know why we're here, or did I miss the memo about the world's weirdest class reunion? If this is some kind of escape room, they've certainly committed to the bit," replied one of the others, a gaunt man with a perpetually skeptical expression. "Name's Murrin. I'd shake your hand, but I'm not sure I trust anything in this place, including you." "Arlen," he responded, offering a lopsided grin. "But you already knew that, didn't you?" The third figure stepped forward, a woman with a mane of unruly hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen a few more lifetimes than the rest of them. "Nella," she said, "and for the record, I'm not big on group activities either, so if this is a team-building exercise, I'd like to file a complaint." "Duly noted," Arlen replied. "But unless either of you have a brilliant escape plan, we might be stuck doing Trust Falls." "Trust Falls? In here?" Murrin scoffed. "I'm more inclined to think we'll be doing more falling than trusting." "Is it bad that I find that comforting?" Arlen mused. Just then, a clattering sound from the edge of the room pulled their attention to a 4th figure, who was neither human nor particularly friendly-looking. The alien was tall, slender, and about as approachable as a cactus. It had skin like polished stone and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you, which was unnerving to say the least. "Ah, the welcoming committee," Arlen said to himself. "I was beginning to think the hospitality here was lacking." "You are awake," the alien said, voice as smooth as oil on water. "Good. My name is Jinar. I am here to orient you." "Orient us?" Nella raised an eyebrow. "Is that code for something, or did we just get abducted by the least efficient kidnappers in the galaxy?" "Neither," Jinar replied, its expression inscrutable. "You are in an exhibition, a zoo if you will." Silence followed, the kind of silence that usually precedes someone yelling, "You've got to be kidding me," loud enough to wake the dead. Murrin, ever the skeptic, was the first to break it. "A zoo," he repeated, skepticism thick in his voice. "For what? Alien tourists." "Correct," Jinar said, as if they'd just answered a particularly easy trivia question. "You are part of an exhibit on human behavior." "Well, they are in for a treat," Arlen said with a snort. "We're as representative of humanity as a 3-legged dog in a foot race." "You understand the situation then," Jinar said, its tone giving no hint of amusement, or anything else for that matter. "Yeah, sure," Nella replied, crossing her arms. "We're the main attraction in a goddamn intergalactic petting zoo. Fantastic." Murrin shook his head, as if trying to clear it of the absurdities piling up. "All right, so what's the angle here? You display us like some kind of sideshow. Get your kicks watching us eat, sleep, and complain." Jinar's gaze was inscrutable, like it was considering whether to answer or simply let them stew in their confusion. "There is more to your presence here than simple observation," it said finally, a shadow of something like regret passing over its features. "Oh, wonderful," Arlen muttered. "We're not just zoo animals, we're special zoo animals. We do not do this out of cruelty," Jinar said, its voice softening just a fraction, "though I understand why you might see it that way. Forgive us if we're not exactly thrilled to be added to the cosmic menagerie," Murren said dryly. "So what's the catch?" Jinar hesitated, and for the first time Arlen thought he saw something almost human in its eyes, a flicker of doubt or maybe pity. "That is something you must discover for yourselves," it said, turning away. "Great," Nella said, her voice dripping sarcasm. "A cosmic mystery wrapped in an enigma stuffed into a zoo. At least we've got a theme," Arlen said. "What do you think the gift shop's like?" "Probably sells existential dread by the pound," Murren replied, rubbing at his temples. Jinar paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. "I will return," it said, a promise and a warning all in one. As the door slid shut behind it, the three humans were left in the dim, unsettling half-light once more. "Well," Arlen said, clapping his hands together, "who's up for a little recon?" Nella and Murren exchanged a look that said they weren't exactly enthused about the idea, but what choice did they have? "I suppose we should see what kind of nightmare show we're starring in," Nella said, moving towards the exit. "Let's hope they at least offer snacks," Murren added as they followed her out. The corridor beyond was as dimly lit as their makeshift cell, with walls smooth and featureless. As they walked, the silence was punctuated by distant sounds, unidentifiable clicks and whirs that set Arlen's nerves on edge. "So," Arlen said, trying to lighten the mood, "everyone remember where we parked?" "Pretty sure my parking ticket expired a few centuries ago," Nella replied, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Wonder if they'll still boot us." "If they do," Murren said, "I'm making you pay the fine." They walked for what felt like hours or maybe minutes. Time seemed to stretch and compress in this place like a rubber band with a grudge. Eventually they reached an intersection, a crossroads of sorts. "Left or right?" Arlen asked, glancing both ways down identical corridors. "Or we keep going straight," Nella suggested, peering into the darkness ahead. "But knowing our luck, we'll end up in the gift shop." "I'm leaning left," Murren said, "mostly because it feels like something different." "Different's good," Arlen agreed. "Lead the way, fearless navigator." As they turned down the left corridor, a thought occurred to Arlen. "You ever stop to think how messed up it is that we're already this comfortable joking about being trapped in an alien zoo?" "Comes with the territory," Nella said. "Humans adapt or we go crazy, sometimes both." "Words to live by," Arlen agreed. "Or words to lament by." They continued down the corridor, their footsteps echoing strangely. With each step, Arlen felt a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just the bizarre situation. It was something in the air, a tension that seemed to ratchet up with every passing moment. It wasn't long before they discovered the corridor did indeed lead somewhere, a large, circular chamber bathed in an eerie, greenish glow. In the center of the room, raised on a dais like some kind of prize exhibit, was a massive view screen. "What do you think?" Arlen asked, taking a cautious step forward. "Alien Netflix." "God, I hope not," Nella said. "Can't stand cliffhangers." Murren approached the console, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Let's see what this thing does before we start uploading our consciousness to the space internet." Arlen joined him, peering at the alien symbols flashing across the screen. "Got any idea what you're doing?" "Not a clue," Murren admitted, "but I'm pretty sure that's not going to stop me." With a few hesitant keystrokes, the screen flickered and an image came into focus. Rows and rows of transparent cells, much like the one they'd awoken in, each one containing a human suspended in a state of cryogenic sleep. "Well, that's not disturbing at all," Nella said, her voice flat. "Looks like we're not the only exhibits," Arlen said, a chill running down his spine. "What do you think the admission fee is?" "Too high if you ask me," Murren replied, staring at the screen with a mixture of fascination and horror. And they call us the superior species, Nella muttered. We've been reduced to sideshow attractions. As they watched, the view on the screen shifted, zooming in on one of the cells. A figure inside was stirring, their eyes fluttering open. Looks like someone else is waking up, Arlen said, a sense of urgency rising in his chest. We need to figure out what's going on before they end up as confused as we were. A realization hit Murren like a punch to the gut. What if they're waking more of us? What if this is just the beginning? Arlen exchanged a look with Nella. Then we'd better find some answers. Fast. With renewed determination, they turned away from the screen, back towards the labyrinthine corridors that lay ahead. The stakes were higher than they'd imagined, and time was running out. As they hurried back into the maze, Arlen couldn't shake the feeling that they were little more than rats in a cosmic experiment, running through a maze with no clear way out. But determination or insanity, maybe both, would drive them forward. And somewhere in the shadows, Jinar watched, its unreadable eyes tracking their every move. This was far from over. Arlen, Murren, and Nella made their way through the maze-like corridors, the strange greenish light casting shadows that seemed to mock them. Each step was a reminder of their predicament, trapped in an alien zoo like some interstellar oddities. You had to laugh or you'd cry, and Arlen was running low on tears. So, when do we get the t-shirt saying I went to an alien zoo and all I got was this existential crisis? Arlen quipped, glancing back at his companions. Right after the complimentary lobotomy, Nella replied, her voice as dry as the air in the corridors. Arlen chuckled, despite himself. Could be worse, I suppose, he mused. They could have thrown us into the reptile house. With our luck, that's probably next on the agenda, Murren added, shaking his head. We should focus on figuring out what the hell they actually want from us. Right, the big cosmic mystery, Arlen said, trying to keep his tone light. Why are we here? What do these intergalactic voyeurs want with a bunch of plucky earthlings? The brochure said study human empathy, Nella replied, her fingers forming air quotes. Sounds ridiculous, but maybe they're serious. Empathy? Arlen snorted. What are they planning to do, weaponize our feelings? Use us to hug their enemies to death? Murren looked thoughtful, or as close to it as you could get in this situation. It might not be that far off, he said. Think about it. If they can understand our emotions, they could manipulate them, use them to control us or others. Great, Nella said, rolling her eyes. We're going to be turned into weaponized therapists, just what I always wanted. Beats being dead, Arlen countered, though even he wasn't entirely convinced. As they turned another corner, they found themselves in a room with an enormous transparent wall. Beyond it, an alien landscape stretched out, dotted with bizarre structures that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of architects on a collective acid trip. Home sweet home, Murren muttered, peering through the glass. Or at least our new digs. Looks like they roll out the red carpet for their guests, Arlen said. Assuming you're into dystopian chic. Beyond the glass, Arlen could make out other pods similar to the one they'd woken up in, scattered like forgotten toys. Inside, other humans lay suspended, their faces eerily serene. You know, Arlen said, I never thought I'd sympathize with a fish in an aquarium, but here we are. Hey, at least you don't have to worry about someone tapping on the glass, Nella replied. Though I suppose that's the least of our worries. Murren was staring intently at one of the pods, a look of realization dawning on his face. This isn't just about observation, he said slowly. They're conditioning them. Conditioning? Nella asked. Like training a dog to fetch, Murren nodded, or humans to comply. If they can control empathy, they can control behavior, make us docile. Make us do whatever they want. Great, Arlen said. We're not just in a zoo, we're in a behavioral lab. Next thing you know, they'll have us running mazes for cheese. Assuming we get any cheese, Nella added. Arlen sighed, running a hand through his hair. So, what do we do about it? We can't just sit around waiting to become Stepford humans. Empathy might be the key, Murren said. If they're studying it, maybe we can use it against them. Turn their own game back on them, Nella asked, raising an eyebrow. Exactly, Murrin replied. If we can connect with the others in the pods, rally them, maybe we can break out of here. Sounds like a long shot, Arlen said, but what the hell, I'm in. Beats waiting around for them to turn us into obedient little drones. All right, Nella said, determination in her voice. Let's find a way to link up with the others. If we can get a message out, we might just have a chance. Great, Arlen said with a grin. Just one question. Anyone know how to send a mass text in space? Asterisk 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 the control room, or what they assumed was the control room, was as nondescript as the rest of the place, filled with consoles displaying alien text that danced across the screens like cryptic hieroglyphs. Arlen approached one of the consoles, staring at it like it had just insulted his mother. So how do we break into a system we can't even read? By guessing and hoping for the best, Murrin replied, stepping up beside him. Ah, the age-old strategy of smash and hope, Arlen said. My favorite. Nella hovered nearby, keeping an eye on the corridor. Just make sure you don't accidentally hit the self-destruct button, she advised dryly. Do they even have those on alien zoos? Arlen asked, feigning innocence. With our luck, probably, Nella replied. They worked in silence, the occasional beep or whir from the consoles punctuating their efforts. Arlen fiddled with the controls, trying not to think about how much trouble they'd be in if they got caught. Hey, I think I've got something, Murrin said, as a series of symbols lit up the screen. Is it get out of jail free? Arlen asked hopefully. Better, Murrin replied. I think it's a communication network. If we can access it, we might be able to send a message to the others. Well, hot damn, Arlen said. Guess it's time to test how good their interstellar Wi-Fi is. Working together, they tapped into the network, sending out a signal they hoped would reach the other pods. It wasn't much, a simple request for anyone awake to respond, but it was a start. As they waited for a response, Arlen felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Here they were, a ragtag group of humans in a cosmic zoo, trying to outsmart their captors with little more than ingenuity and a healthy dose of sarcasm. Think it'll work? Nella asked, glancing at Arlen. I don't know, Arlen admitted, but it's better than sitting around waiting for someone else to save us. Yeah, Murrin agreed. If there's one thing humans are good at, it's making a mess of things when we have to. Let's hope we're messy enough to get out of here, Nella said with a wry smile. And so they waited, the alien consoles humming quietly, the weight of their situation bearing down on them like a physical presence. It was a gamble, but it was all they had. Arlen just hoped they wouldn't end up regretting which one of them decided to roll the dice first. Asterisk 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 an hour later, or perhaps it was a day, time had become a cruel joke. The console beeped, a series of alien symbols flashing across the screen. Looks like we got a nibble, Murrin said, scanning the readout. Someone's trying to reply. Whoever they are, they're either brave, stupid, or both, Arlen said. Sounds like our kind of people, Nella replied with a smirk. Arlen tapped the console, opening a line of communication. A moment later, a voice crackled to life, distorted but unmistakably human. Hello, is anyone there? Arlen exchanged a glance with his companions. Yeah, we're here, he said into the console. Welcome to the alien zoo. Enjoy your stay. Somewhere across the stars, a chuckle echoed back. Figures we'd end up in a place like this. Join the club, Nella said. We're working on a plan to get out. Care to help? There was a pause, then the voice replied, hell, why not? Beats waiting for the next feeding time. For the first time since they'd woken up in this nightmare, Arlen felt a flicker of hope. They weren't alone and they weren't helpless. It was a small victory, but in the face of everything else, it felt monumental. All right, Murrin said. Let's coordinate, see if we can wake up more people, get them on board. Sounds like a plan, the voice replied. Let's show these aliens what humans can really do. With renewed vigor, Arlen and his companions set to work, reaching out to the other pods, rousing more of their fellow captives. Each new voice was a reminder that they were not just zoo exhibits, they were people, and they were not going to give up without a fight. It was a long shot, a desperate gambit in an unwinnable game, but it was all they had. And for now, that was enough. As Arlen worked, he felt a strange sense of camaraderie with these strangers he'd never met, bound together by circumstance and the shared will to defy their captors. It was a peculiar twist of fate, absurd and daunting in equal measure. In the end, Arlen mused, maybe empathy wasn't such a bad weapon after all. And somewhere in the shadows, Jinar watched, its inscrutable gaze focused on the humans, a curious blend of interest and uncertainty in its eyes. This was far from over, and the humans were proving to be more resourceful than anticipated. But then again, they always had been. The control room was as welcoming as a tax audit, its consoles awash in alien text that might as well have been the mumblings of a drunken spider. Arlen squinted at the screens, wondering if this was what it felt like to be a caveman staring at a smartphone, waiting for it to conjure fire. "All right," Arlen said, cracking his knuckles like a hacker in a bad movie. "Time to poke the bear and see if it growls." "Just so we're clear," Nella chimed in, leaning against the wall, "our brilliant plan is to annoy the aliens until they give us a stern talking to. With any luck," Arlen replied. "And who knows? Maybe they'll ground us and take away our TV privileges." "Better than our lives, I suppose," Murren offered, his eyes scanning the alien hieroglyphs like he might suddenly understand them through sheer willpower. Arlen tapped the console, piecing together an electronic message that was part distress signal, part angry Yelp review. It was a gamble, one he hoped wouldn't end with them getting vaporized or subjected to intergalactic customer complaints department hell. "All right," he said, hitting send. Message in a bottle launched into the cosmic sea. Fingers crossed it doesn't come back with a giant return to sender sticker. As they waited for a response, the silence stretched out long enough to make even the consoles seem awkward. It was the sort of quiet that made you wish for elevator music just to fill the void. "So," Arlen said, trying to break the tension, "anyone got any good alien abduction jokes, or is that too soon?" "Depends," Nella replied with a smirk. "Do they involve probing?" Before Arlen could come up with a suitably inappropriate punchline, the console chimed. Symbols flared to life, a waterfall of alien text streaming down the screen. Murren leaned over, trying to decipher the alien gibberish with all the enthusiasm of a student staring down a math test. "Looks like we've got a response," Murren said. "Great," Arlen replied. "Let's hope it doesn't translate to prepare for vaporization." Nella joined them, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "What do you think they're saying?" Murren's brow furrowed as he read. "Something about interference, unacceptable conduct, and a bunch of other gibberish. But I think they're not thrilled with us trying to chat them up." "Guess they're not used to inmates sending messages to the warden," Arlen said. "Or they just don't like the idea of their pets talking back," Nella added. The console flickered and more text scrolled across the screen, a stream of alien prose that seemed to pulse with barely contained irritation. Arlen imagined an alien somewhere, its tentacles tied in knots over their little act of rebellion. "Okay, this is interesting," Murren said, his eyes narrowing as he read. "Something about understanding and being observed. Sounds like they are acknowledging us." "Really?" Arlen said. "I was hoping for a thanks for your feedback, we value your opinion kind of deal." The console chimed again, and this time a holographic image flickered to life, a vague shape that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a tax attorney. Its voice crackled through the speakers, distorted but intelligible. "Humans, you have interfered with our processes," it said, its tone as flat as a board meeting. "Your actions are noted. Further disruption will not be tolerated." "Well, good to know we have their attention," Nella muttered. Arlen leaned closer to the console, grinning like a cat that had just found the cream. "So what do we do now?" "Ask for a meeting with the head honcho. Let's try not to get ourselves spaced," Murren cautioned. "We need more information first." "Agreed," Nella added. "Let's see if we can dig a little deeper into their system. Maybe there's something they're not telling us." With that, they turned their attention back to the console, their fingers dancing over the controls with a mixture of hopeful desperation and foolhardy courage. What do you think we're looking for? Arlen asked, scanning the alien text for anything that might resemble a clue. Anything that might give us leverage, Murren replied, his voice tense with concentration. Maybe something about their research, their goals. Anything, Arlen sighed. Well, let's hope they're as bad at keeping secrets as they are at hospitality. As they worked, the room seemed to close in around them, the dim lighting casting shadows that flickered like ghosts. Arlen tried to ignore the creeping sense of claustrophobia, focusing on the task at hand. Hey, Nella said suddenly, pointing at a section of the screen. What's that? Arlen squinted at the text, a series of symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange intensity. Looks like some kind of archive, he said. Or a recipe for alien cookies, Nella joked. Only one way to find out, Arlen said, tapping the screen. The console hummed, the symbols shifting and changing until an image flickered into view, a rusted piece of metal etched with human symbols. Arlen leaned closer, his heart skipping a beat. Is that? Murren began, trailing off as he stared at the artifact. Looks like something from Earth, Arlen said, a sense of wonder mingling with disbelief. But how the hell did it get here? Nella frowned, her mind racing. Maybe it's from one of the earlier expeditions, or, hell, I don't know, but it must be important. Important enough for them to keep it hidden, Murren mused. Arlen felt a surge of determination. Well, if it's important to them, then it's important to us. Let's see if we can find out more. They delved into the archive, the alien symbols giving way to images and data that painted a picture as fragmented as a shattered mirror. The artifact was part of a larger collection, each piece a relic of humanity's past, and every piece was catalogued with a level of detail that spoke to the aliens' obsession. Looks like they're studying us the way we study ancient civilizations, Murren said, his voice tinged with awe. Or they're just really into antiques, Nella quipped. Arlen felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever it is, it's clear they value this stuff. Maybe too much. Could be our ticket out of here, Murren suggested. If we can figure out why they're so interested, maybe we can use it to our advantage. And if not, Nella said, at least we'll know what we're up against. As they continued to explore the archive, Arlen couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something big. Whatever the aliens were planning, it was clear that they saw humanity as more than just a curiosity. We need to get this information to the others, Arlen said. If we're going to make a move, we need everyone on board. Agreed, Murren replied. No more half measures, it's time to play our hand. With that, they set to work, using the console to send out a message to the other pods. It was a risk, but one they had to take. Let's hope they are as ready for a revolution as we are, Nella said, her voice steady. Arlen nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. It was a long shot, but in a situation like this, long shots were all they had. And if we're lucky, he said, maybe we'll get to see the look on those aliens' faces when they realize we're not just their playthings. The console beeped, confirming their message had been sent. Now all they could do was wait. As they settled in, Arlen felt a renewed sense of purpose. They might be trapped in an alien zoo, but they were far from beaten. Here's to hoping our fellow inmates are as crazy as we are, Nella said, raising an imaginary glass. Crazy enough to help us break out, Murren added. Arlen chuckled, a dark humor in his voice. Well, if nothing else, at least we won't die of boredom. The hours passed in a blur of tension and anticipation, each beep of the console a reminder that their captors were likely watching every move. Think they'll respond again? Nella asked, her eyes fixed on the screen. They'd be stupid not to, Arlen replied. And if there's one thing I've learned about aliens, it's that they are not above being stupid. The console chimed once more, the alien text scrolling across the screen with an urgency that was hard to ignore. This time, the holographic jellyfish made another appearance, its voice dripping with something Arlen could only describe as alien disdain. Humans, it said, you meddle in affairs beyond your understanding. Cease your interference or face the consequences, Murren sighed, rubbing his temples. Honestly, do they have to be so damn cryptic? Well, at least we know they're paying attention, Nella said. Now we just have to figure out what to do with that attention. Arlen grinned, the thrill of rebellion coursing through his veins. Simple. We keep pushing. Make them realize that we're more than just lab rats. And what if they don't take kindly to that? Murren asked. Then we show them why messing with humans is a bad idea, Arlen replied, his voice filled with a gritty determination. For now, it was all they could do. Push back, gather allies, and hope that their captors underestimated the stubbornness of their species. With a renewed sense of purpose, they continued their work, ready to face whatever came next. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark. But as Arlen knew all too well, sometimes those were the only shots worth taking. The alien zoo wasn't exactly kicking off a revolution, but you could say it was a pretty good imitation of a paranoid asylum. Paranoia spread faster than a bad rumor, and Arlen's group was no exception. They were playing a high-stakes game of is this a trap or did I just make it worse? With the Xylith, those jellyfish tax attorneys of the universe. The corridors with their greenish light felt more like the inside of a stomach than ever before. Murren had jokingly referred to them as intestinal, but nobody was laughing now. The Xylith had ramped up their psychological warfare, and not in the fun who moved my coffee cup sort of way. More like why does this room suddenly smell like distrust and desperation? Okay, get this, Arlen said, trying to throw some levity into their grim little gathering. What did the paranoid android say? Please tell me it's not there after my motherboard. Nella replied, rolling her eyes. Arlen shrugged. Close enough, but no. It's I know you're out to get me, but can we reschedule? The awkward laugh that followed could have been labeled as a dying species, preserved only for moments of absolute tension. Murren was too busy frowning at the console to join in. He'd become the resident linguist, trying to make sense of alien gibberish with the help of a translation program that was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Shut up a second, Murren said, his eyes narrowing at the console. It's doing that thing again. What thing? The we're going to overanalyze your every move thing, Nella asked, her sarcasm a defense mechanism against the gnawing fear. No, here's another cryptic message that might mean they're going to flush us out the airlock thing, Murren replied. Arlen leaned over, squinting at the screen like it owed him money. You know, if I wanted to be insulted, I'd just call my ex. At least she was more direct. The console displayed another string of alien text. This time it was accompanied by an image of one of their fellow human inmates, staring at the camera with an expression that could only be described as existential dread. Looks like they're stepping up the mind games, Nella said, her voice hardening. They know we're onto something, Murren sighed. Well, it's working, we're all jumping at shadows here. Arlen scratched his head, a habit he'd picked up whenever things got too complicated. What do you reckon they want? Scare us into submission? Probably, Murren said, leaning back in his chair. But they're making a mistake if they think fear's the only thing driving us. Nella snorted. Fear, stupidity, and a touch of insanity. That's our cocktail. As if on cue, the console flickered again, this time spitting out a hologram of one of the Xylith, a floating jellyfish with the voice of a malfunctioning GPS. Its voice crackled through the speakers, dripping with a disdain only a bureaucrat could muster. Humans, your actions continue to disrupt our research. Cease immediately or we will enact corrective measures. Corrective measures, Arlen said with a wry smile. What are they going to do, send us to our room without dinner? Murren shook his head. I think they are already doing it. Just a different kind of dinner. The group lapsed into silence, the weight of their situation pressing down like a physical force. Trust was a currency in short supply, and everyone was operating on a shoestring budget. Look, Arlen said, breaking the silence. We need to keep it together. If we start turning on each other, we might as well hand ourselves over to them on a silver platter. Yeah, Nella agreed, though her voice was tinged with doubt. But what if someone talks? What if someone already has? Murren looked up from the console, his face set in determination. Then we need to find out who and why, but we can't start throwing accusations around without proof. Arlen nodded, trying to maintain a semblance of unity. Right. Until then, we keep our heads down and our eyes open. It was easier said than done. As the hours crept by, the atmosphere in the room grew more oppressive, the tension between the group members palpable. Everyone was on edge, flinching at every noise like it was the herald of something worse. But it wasn't until they stumbled upon the sympathizer that things took a turn for the even stranger. The console, ever the bearer of bad news and cryptic warnings, pinged with another message. This time, however, it was different. It wasn't the usual alien text, but a series of human symbols, a code. "Someone's trying to talk to us," Nella said, her voice tinged with surprise. "Let's hope it's not another Xylith prank," Arlen said, skepticism slipping in like an unwelcome guest. Murrin worked on the translation, his fingers flying over the console with a sense of urgency. "It's from someone on the inside." "But not one of us." "What do you mean, not one of us?" Arlen asked. Murrin looked up, his face a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "I think it's from one of the Xylith." The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. A Xylith sympathizer. The idea was as ludicrous as it was exciting. "Are they pulling our leg?" Nella asked, suspicion threading through her voice. "Could be a trap," Arlen said. "Or it could be our way out." The message was brief, a simple warning about increased surveillance and a location in the maze-like corridors where they could meet without being detected. "We have to go," Arlen said, the decision as much a gamble as anything else they'd done. Nella hesitated. "And if it's a setup?" Arlen shrugged. "Then we're out of options and it's game over anyway." They made their way through the dimly lit corridors, trying to ignore the mocking shadows that danced around them. Each step felt like a countdown to disaster, but the faint glimmer of hope pushed them onward. The meeting point was a nondescript room, just like every other in this place. Dark, lifeless, a perfect setting for betrayal. But waiting inside wasn't the ambush they feared. Instead, a Xylith hovered in the center, its tentacles languidly drifting like it was relaxing on a Sunday afternoon. It spoke, and the voice was surprisingly soft, tinged with something that might have been understanding. "Humans," it began, "I am Xurix. You must listen. There are those among us who question the ethics of this experiment." Arlen exchanged a glance with Nella. "So you're saying not all of you are sadistic overlords?" Xurix's tentacles twitched, a sign of amusement Arlen hoped. "Indeed, some of us believe your empathy is unique, valuable. Guess they don't teach empathy in Jellyfish School," Nella muttered. Xurix continued, ignoring the jibe. "I cannot act directly, but I can provide information. Help you navigate the systems." Murrin stepped forward, cautious yet hopeful. "Why help us?" Xurix paused, its tentacles drifting in thought. "Because you're kind." "Fascinates." "And because change is needed." Arlen nodded, a grim determination settling in. "Then let's shake things up, shall we?" Xurix provided a data chip, encoded with information that could potentially turn the tide. It was a sliver of hope, fragile as glass but just as sharp. As they made their way back to the others, Arlen felt a mix of elation and dread. They'd gained an ally, albeit a reluctant one, but in a place like this, even that was a victory. "Think we can trust it?" Nella asked, her voice low. Arlen shrugged, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Trust might be a bit much. But we can use it." Back at the console, they began to delve into the data Xurix had provided. It was a treasure trove of information, detailing the Xylith's experiments, their goals, their weaknesses. "Looks like we've got the keys to the kingdom," Murrin said, his voice laced with optimism. Arlen, however, remained cautious. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've still got a long way to go." The mood had shifted, a flicker of hope replacing the pervasive dread. But the paranoia remained, lurking at the edges like a shadow that couldn't be shaken. If nothing else, they'd been given a fighting chance. And in a place designed to strip them of everything, that was enough. For now. Arlen paced the dim room, the weight of the situation pressing on him like an overzealous aunt at a family reunion. The air was stagnant, thick with an impending sense of doom that seemed to cling to the walls like bad wallpaper. Nella was leaning against the console, arms crossed, her expression a cocktail of cynicism and grudging hope. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" she asked, her tone as dry as the last piece of cake at a kid's birthday party. Arlen looked around at the faces of his ragtag group, each one marked by fatigue and weariness. "Plan." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I was thinking we could all hold hands and sing Kumbaya," Murren snorted, not looking up from the console. His focus was relentless, like a dog with a bone, or in this case, a linguist with alien gibberish. "I'm not sure that'll help if they're planning to release the empathy weapon. We need something concrete, not a sing-along." "Concrete?" Nella echoed, raising an eyebrow. "The only concrete thing here is our chances of dying in the most pathetic way possible." "Look," Arlen said, trying to inject some semblance of authority into his voice, "we need to figure out a way to disable the weapon. This data Zurich gave us. There's got to be something useful. Maybe we could just ask them nicely to stop," Murren suggested, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because that's always worked so well before." Arlen rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that had become second nature when faced with the impossible. "Yeah, I'm sure their main weakness is politeness. Didn't you hear? The Xylith are notorious for their impeccable manners," Nella quipped, "especially when they're threatening to turn us into empathy puppets." The humor was a thin shield, barely concealing the underlying fear. Despite their bravado, they all knew the situation was dire. The Xylith's empathy weapon wasn't just a threat, it was an existential crisis wrapped in alien tech and bureaucracy. Murren tapped a few keys on the console, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Okay, I think I found something. A power grid that supports the empathy array. If we can disrupt it, we might buy ourselves some time." "Time for what?" Nella shot back. "Time to find a new way to fail." Arlen held up a hand, quelling the brewing tension. "Time to find a real solution. We can't just sit here and wait for the Xylith to play us like fiddles." The room fell silent, the gravity of the task ahead sinking in. Trust was a rare commodity, as valuable and scarce as water in a desert, and what they desperately needed now was faith in each other. "All right," Arlen said, determination creeping into his voice, "let's break it down. How do we hit this power grid?" Murren began outlining the plan, every word chosen with precision. It involved navigating the maze-like corridors, a task tantamount to a blindfolded hike through a minefield. "Great," Nella said, her sarcasm undeterred. "So we just waltz through the intestines of this place, hoping we don't step on a metaphorical landmine?" "Pretty much," Murren replied. "And maybe try not to look like deer in headlights while doing it." With the plan set, they prepared to move. But the universe, never one to miss a chance to kick someone when they are down, decided to throw a wrench into their already rickety machine. The console beeped, announcing another message. This one was different, an internal communication, the kind that didn't just slip through the cracks but was shoved through with malicious intent. Guys," Murren said, his voice tinged with unease. "We've got a problem." Arlen moved closer, reading the message over Murren's shoulder. It was a report from a hidden Xylith observer. A report detailing everything they'd been up to, including their newfound alliance with Zurich. Nella swore under her breath, a creative string of expletives that would have made a sailor blush. "Someone ratted us out. Looks like we've got a Xylith fan club member in our midst," Arlen muttered. "Great. Just what we needed." The realization hit like a gut punch, doubling the tension in the room. If there was a traitor among them, their chances of survival had just plummeted from slim to anorexic. "We need to find out who it is," Nella said, her voice cold and sharp as a blade, "before they feed us to the Xylith on a silver platter." Murren's fingers flew over the console, trying to trace the source of the leak. "It's coming from within our group, but I can't pinpoint who." Arlen clenched his jaw, wrestling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Keep working on it. We need to know who's got a knife poised for our backs." The atmosphere was taut, strung tight with suspicion and fraying nerves. Paranoia crept in, whispering insidious thoughts and sowing discord. Nella's eyes darted around the room, her gaze sharp and calculating. "If it's one of us, they've been pretty damn convincing." "Yeah," Arlen agreed, his mind racing. Too convincing. The clock was ticking and the Xylith wouldn't wait for them to sort out their internal mess. With every second, their window of opportunity narrowed, closing like the jaws of a trap. The traitors' betrayal was a festering wound, infecting their unity and eroding their trust. And as much as Arlen wanted to believe in the people around him, the facts were hard to ignore. "Keep your eyes peeled," he ordered, the words heavy with the weight of their predicament. "And let's hit that power grid before it's too late." As they set off through the corridors, the shadows seemed to mock them, taunting with their elongated shapes and sinister whispers. The air was thick with tension, each step a potential betrayal. They navigated the twists and turns, the greenish light casting everything in a sickly hue. It was like walking through the digestive tract of a beast, the walls slick with the promise of danger. "Feels like we're on a one-way trip to hell," Nella muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could be worse," Arlen replied. "Could be on a round trip." Despite the gravity of their mission, the banter was a lifeline, keeping them grounded and connected. But the specter of betrayal loomed large, casting a long shadow over their every move. As they approached the power grid, the tension in the air was palpable, a living entity that clawed at their skin and gnawed at their resolve. The control panel loomed before them, alien and inscrutable. "All right," Murren said, taking point. "Let's see if we can't turn off the lights on this little nightmare." But just as he began working on the panel, a sound shattered the quiet, a sound that chilled the blood and turned their stomachs to lead. Footsteps. Not just any footsteps, but those that spoke of authority and malice. The kind that belonged to the Xylith enforcers. "Looks like they've sent the welcoming committee," Nella said, her voice tight with fear and defiance. Arlen cursed under his breath, reaching for the makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from scrap. "We need more time." "Time we don't have," Murren replied, his fingers moving with frantic urgency. The footsteps grew closer, a relentless march of inevitability. The group braced for confrontation, their hearts pounding like war drums in their chests. But just as the first Xylith rounded the corner, a figure stepped forward from the shadows. Xurix, their unlikely ally and potential savior. "Humans," Xurix said, its voice a calm amidst the chaos. "Allow me." With a deft movement, one of Xurix's tentacles reached out, connecting with the control panel. The lights flickered, the power grid momentarily disrupted by the alien's intervention. "Guess it pays to have friends in low places," Arlen muttered, his gratitude mingling with relief. The Xylith enforcers hesitated, confused by the sudden outage. It was the opening they needed, a fleeting moment of opportunity. "Let's move," Arlen shouted, leading the charge through the disoriented guards. They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline fueling their escape. The maze was a blur of shadows and sharp turns, every step a gamble with fate. But behind them the footsteps resumed, a relentless pursuit that promised no mercy. "Keep going," Murren urged, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Don't look back." As they rounded another corner, Arlen's mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and survival. The traitor among them remained hidden, a shadow lurking within their ranks. But for now they had to focus on the immediate threat, the Xylith enforcers and their damned empathy weapon. The corridors stretched endlessly ahead, a labyrinth of despair and determination. But amidst the chaos, a sliver of hope glimmered, a fragile beacon urging them onward. "Almost there," Nella shouted, her voice a lifeline in the tumultuous sea of uncertainty. They burst into the final chamber, panting and exhausted but alive. The power grid lay before them, its systems vulnerable and exposed. "Now," Arlen commanded, his voice steely with resolve. Murren didn't need to be told twice. He attacked the controls with a fervor, disrupting the systems and buying them precious time. As the lights flickered and died, the Xylith enforcers faltered, their formation breaking amidst the confusion. It was the opening they needed, a desperate gamble that had paid off. Arlen turned to Xurix, gratitude etched in the lines of his face. "Why help us?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Xurix's tentacles twitched, a gesture of consideration. Because sometimes the greatest change comes from the most unlikely alliances. With their immediate threat neutralized, the group retreated, the shadows of betrayal and survival dogging their steps. In the dim corridor, Arlen looked at his companions, each one of them marked by the grim reality of their situation. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered and difficult to rebuild. But for now, they had bought themselves a sliver of hope, a chance to fight another day. And as Arlen led them forward, one thought dominated his mind: find the traitor, expose the betrayal, and turn the tide against their alien captors. Because in the end, it was all or nothing, and they'd come too far to lose everything now. The control room was still as Arlen and his ragtag crew caught their breath, Xerx's tentacles tracing lazy patterns across the now-dormant control panel. It was nice to see something finally going their way, even if it took a tentacled pseudo-alien to make it happen. "All right, folks," Arlen said, trying to channel some leadership amidst the chaos. "We've cut the lights, but we're still knee-deep in the Xylith's playground. Anyone got a plan B?" Nella leaned against the console, her face lit by the emergency red lighting that painted everyone like a low-budget horror film. "Plan B. How about plan get the hell out ta here? The ambience leaves a lot to be desired." "Yeah, nothing like a leisurely stroll through an alien zoo," Murrin added, wiping sweat off his brow. "I was hoping for more screaming children and overpriced snacks." Arlen grinned despite the pressure. "Well, if we can manage to hijack the empathy weapon, we can make this place a lot less inviting for everyone except us." "Sounds like a solid plan," Nella replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just us against the most advanced piece of alien tech since ever." Xerx's tentacles twitched, the alien version of an eye roll maybe. "Humans," it said, "always underestimating themselves. Your resilience is your strongest weapon." Arlen nodded, though his gut felt like it was hosting a colony of butterflies on a caffeine binge. "All right, Xerx, you and Murrin focus on reversing that empathy weapon. Make it feel empathy for us instead of blasting us with it." Murrin shot him a sharp salute, eyes gleaming with determination. Or was that madness? "Just like reprogramming a toaster, right?" "Sure. If the toaster could melt your brain," Nella pointed out. "Please, no toasters," Arlen deadpanned. "Let's keep it simple." As Murrin and Xerx dove into the guts of the control panel, Arlen studied his team. The pressure was palpable, a thick fog settling over their motley crew. Trust was a brittle thing in a setup like this, more fragile than an egg under a hammer. And speaking of hammers, he'd like one about now, preferably to use on the traitor threatening to crack them. "Nella," Arlen said, pulling her aside, "we need to keep an eye out. If there's a rat in our crew, we can't afford any surprises." Nella nodded, eyes like twin searchlights. "I'll keep my senses on high alert. You just focus on not getting us blown to bits." "Oh, that's the easy part," Arlen replied, a wry grin pulling at his lips. "Everyone knows I'm too stubborn to die, or too bad at it," Nella countered with a smirk. Meanwhile, Murrin and Xerx were hard at work, a symphony of rapid typing and alien chittering filling the room. The control panel blinked and whirred, lights dancing like they were at an intergalactic disco. Arlen hoped it was all part of the plan and not the precursor to a system-wide meltdown. Murrin paused, glancing over his shoulder. "So, what do we do once we've got this empathy weapon on our side?" Arlen's grin widened, more teeth than humor. "We show the Xylith why you don't mess with humanity. We broadcast. Let the galaxy know we're not just helpless specimens, right? Because nothing says fear us like a bunch of humans punching above their weight class," Nella intoned. Xerx interjected, "Confidence is key. Your species has a knack for the impossible." "Yeah. Or maybe we just don't know when to quit," Arlen quipped. "But either way, let's light a fire under them." The atmosphere was charged, a cocktail of desperation and grim determination. Murrin's fingers were a blur over the controls, and Xerx's tentacles moved with coordinated precision. If anyone could turn an alien weapon into a human advantage, it was them. Or so Arlen hoped. "So, what's your plan if the Xylith catch wind of this little rebellion?" Nella asked, her tone mocking but her eyes serious. "Run faster than you," Arlen shot back. "But seriously, we've got the element of surprise. No one expects the humans to hijack an empathy weapon. Right, because nothing screams master strategist like making it up as we go," Nella said, shaking her head. The control panel emitted a series of clicks and Murrin grinned like he'd just won the lottery. "All right, folks," he announced triumphantly, "we've got a shot at this. Empathy weapons primed and ready to misfire in every possible way." "Misfire at them, I hope," Arlen said, nodding approvingly. "Now let's send a little message. Make sure everyone knows the insufferable humans are still kicking." As Murrin worked on the console, the system began transmitting, short bursts of data sent out into the ether. Arlen could only hope one of them was a signal of hope, a declaration of defiance against their captors. "Here goes nothing," Murrin muttered, hitting the final sequence. The room went silent, the hum of the control panel dying down as the message launched into the galaxy. It was a small act, a tiny rebellion, but it was theirs, and that was something. "We did it," Nella breathed, a note of disbelief in her voice. "For now," Arlen said, always the realist, "but we've just painted a target on our backs. This might get worse before it gets better. Isn't that the human condition?" Murrin asked, his grin still in place. Always ready for the next disaster. Zurich regarded them with something akin to admiration. "Your spirit is indomitable, yeah. Well, let's see if it's also indestructible," Arlen replied. "Because I have a feeling the Xylith are gonna be real pissed off." As if on cue, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor again, a reminder that their victory was short-lived. The Xylith weren't known for their forgiving nature. "Looks like we've overstayed our welcome," Murrin said, unplugging his data tools and packing up. "Time to leave," Arlen agreed, turning to face the corridor. "And maybe we'll find out which one of us is the traitor." The group moved as one, slipping back into the shadows of the maze-like corridors. The greenish light cast long, mocking shadows, but this time Arlen felt a twinge of hope. They had a weapon now. They just had to survive long enough to use it. "We keep moving," he told his team, glancing back at them over his shoulder. "We find somewhere else to regroup, then we hit them again and again until they're sick of us," Nella replied, smiling despite herself. "Sounds like a party. Remind me to never invite you to my birthday," Murrin quipped, earning a laugh from Nella and an eye roll from Arlen. The tension was still there, coiled like a spring, but at least they weren't going down without a fight. The corridor stretched ahead, a path of uncertainty and danger, but it was a path they'd chosen. "Hey, Arlen," Murrin called, slowing his pace. What if we actually pull this off?" Arlen paused, considering the question. "Then maybe we'll finally get some peace and quiet. Not too much, though," Nella interjected. "Can't have us getting bored." "Right," Arlen said, chuckling. "Just enough chaos to keep things interesting." They pressed on, the footsteps behind them a constant reminder of the threat stalking them. But with each step they felt a little more in control, a little more defiant. As they reached a junction, Arlen held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. "All right, we need to split up. Cover more ground, keep them confused." Murrin nodded, already scanning the routes. "I'll take the left with Zurich's. You two go right. Try not to get caught," Nella warned, her tone light but her eyes serious. "Same to you," Murrin replied. Arlen and Nella turned down the right corridor, the walls closing in around them like a vice. The air was thick with tension, every corner a potential trap. "Here's hoping this leads somewhere good," Nella muttered. "If not, we'll make it good," Arlen replied, his voice grimly determined. They moved with purpose, navigating the twists and turns, every step a calculated risk. The shadows seemed to shift and pulse, alive with their own menace, but Arlen refused to be intimidated. Not now. As they rounded the last corner, the sight before them was both a blessing and a curse. A small control room, the perfect place to regroup but also a potential dead end. "Well, home sweet home," Nella said, her voice carrying a hint of irony. "Let's hope it's temporary," Arlen replied, closing the door behind them. The control room was cramped and dimly lit, the consoles humming with a low, mechanical whir. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, at least for the moment. "All right, let's see if we can get this thing working for us," Arlen said, moving to the nearest console. Nella joined him, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar symbols. "Let's just not blow ourselves up in the process." "Good plan," Arlen agreed. "Let's save that for a last resort." As they worked, the hiss of hydraulics and the clatter of tools filled the room, a symphony of desperation and hope. Arlen could only hope that Murren and Zurich were faring just as well. "Got it," Nella exclaimed, a hint of triumph in her voice. The console blinked to life, a series of symbols and graphs scrolling across the screen. It was a small victory, but it was theirs. "Let's see what we've got," Arlen said, leaning over to study the data. The information was dense, packed with alien jargon and unfamiliar patterns. But there, nestled within the chaos, was a glimmer of opportunity, a weakness in the Xylith's defenses. "Looks like we've got something to work with," Nella said, her eyes gleaming. "Now we just need to figure out how to use it," Arlen replied, his mind already racing with possibilities. The control room was silent, save for the hum of machinery and the distant echo of footsteps. The reality of their situation was stark, but they refused to be cowed. "So, what's next?" Nella asked, glancing at Arlen. "We keep going," he replied, his voice a low growl of determination. "We hit them where it hurts, and we don't stop until they beg us to." Nella smiled, her expression fierce and determined. "Let's give them hell, then." Arlen nodded, his gaze steely and resolute. "Let's show them what humans are really made of." As the footsteps drew closer, the group braced for the inevitable confrontation. But this time they had something more, a weapon, a plan, and a defiant spirit that refused to be broken. "All right," Arlen said, his voice firm. "Let's move out." With that, they left the safety of the control room, ready to face whatever the Xylith threw at them. It was a mad gamble, a desperate bid for survival, but it was theirs, and they wouldn't trade it for anything in the universe. The Xylith corridors were as inviting as a tax audit. Arlen and Nella moved with the urgency of people who knew they were living on borrowed time, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down like a bad conscience. The greenish light still mocked them, shadows stretching and twisting as if the walls themselves were whispering ill intentions. "Think the Xylith decorate with the idea of making their guests feel like bugs under a microscope," Nella murmured, a wry grin on her face. "At least bugs get a petri dish," Arlen replied, scanning the corridor for any sign of their pursuers. "We've got a maze that makes a rat's life look straightforward." They rounded a corner and narrowly avoided a collision with Murren and Zurich, both looking as winded as Arlen felt. Zurich's tentacles twitched, an odd sight that was somehow reassuring in its familiarity. "Good news and bad," Murren said as they regrouped, breathing heavily. "Good news. The Xylith are as disorganized as a drunk sock drawer right now. Bad news. It looks like they're pulling their pants up and coming after us." "Sounds like we've got a window then," Arlen said, his mind racing. "Let's make it count." "I'm all for seizing the moment, but can we do it without getting obliterated?" Nella asked, glancing nervously at Zurich, who was busy interfacing with a control panel and mumbling in an odd mix of guttural clicks and hums. "Obliteration's a strong motivator," Zurich replied, not looking up. "But let's try not to test that theory." Arlen nodded, focusing on the task at hand. The empathy weapon was their ace in the hole, and they needed to play it. If only the Xylith hadn't built their infrastructure like a game of six-dimensional chess. "Zurich, how's our empathy bomb looking?" Arlen asked, watching as the pseudo-alien worked with the finesse of a brain surgeon. Zurich's tentacles danced over the controls, and a series of beeps confirmed what they all hoped. "Primed and ready." "Shall we show them some human hospitality?" "Sure, but let's skip the awkward small talk," Murren said, cracking his knuckles with a grin. "Let's go straight to the part where we kick their arses." Arlen felt a flicker of hope, rare and fragile as a snowflake in hell. "All right, team, let's make this count. Once this goes off, the Xylith'll have a mess on their hands." "What's the plan if it goes belly up?" Nella asked, her voice light but her eyes betraying her concern. "Same as always," Arlen said with a shrug. "Run faster than the other guy." "Glad to know you've thought it through," Nella retorted, rolling her eyes. With the empathy weapon set to broadcast, the air around them felt electrified, buzzing with the potential to turn the Xylith's controlled chaos into just chaos. Arlen could almost taste the tension, bitter as burnt coffee. "Zurix, light it up," Arlen commanded, with all the authority of a man who wasn't sure what the hell he was doing but knew he had to pretend otherwise. Zurix's tentacles hit the final sequence, and the weapon activated with a hum that reverberated through the corridors. The effect was immediate and unsettling. Alarms blared, flashing lights casting the world in a frantic, strobe-lit nightmare. "Here we go," Murren said, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "Welcome to the funhouse, fellas." The empathy weapon worked its morbid magic, causing disruptions in the Xylith ranks that were as gratifying as they were bizarre. Captive species, once docile and resigned, started to stir. It was a zoo uprising, and Arlen could almost hear the ghost of P.T. Barnum chuckling somewhere in the cosmic void. In the distance, the echoes of confusion and chaos sounded. The Xylith, not known for their fondness for surprises, were clearly having a bad day. "Looks like the locals are getting restless," Nella observed, a wicked gleam in her eye. "About damn time," Arlen replied, checking his gear. "Let's make sure they stay that way." They moved swiftly, using the chaos as cover to slip deeper into the labyrinthine complex. Every corner presented new threats and opportunities, and paranoia clung to them like a second skin. "Hope you're ready for some improvisation," Arlen said to his team as they navigated the corridors, the sounds of disorder growing louder. "My middle name," Murren replied, holding a data pad like a talisman against insanity. Arlen couldn't help but smirk. Despite the odds, despite the danger, there was something exhilarating about outmaneuvering their captors. It was gallows humor at its finest, a dance on the edge of disaster. As they approached the central chamber where the Xylith leader was likely to be holed up, Arlen felt a grim satisfaction settle over him. This was it. The endgame. "All right, folks," Arlen said, steeling himself for the confrontation. "Time to see what the head honcho's made of." "Probably the same stuff as the rest of the bastards," Nella said dryly. "Arrogance and self-congratulation." "Well, let's hope they're not immune to a little human ingenuity," Zurix added, the closest he'd come to a pep talk. They entered the chamber, the air thick with the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. The Xylith leader, an imposing figure with an aura of authority and a face only a mother could love, regarded them with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Humans," the leader intoned, voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can undermine us with your primitive tricks?" "Tricks? More like party favors," Arlen shot back, taking a step forward. "We're just here to introduce you to the concept of empathy. You know, something you guys could use a crash course in." The Xylith leader sneered, an expression that did wonders for its already horrifying visage. "You believe this will change anything?" Arlen shrugged, nonchalant in the face of potential disembowelment. "Maybe not, but it'll certainly make your day more interesting." The leader's eyes narrowed, calculating and cold, like the universe's worst math teacher. "Your acts of defiance are futile." "Defiance is kind of our thing," Murren piped up, his grin infuriating in its brilliance. "And we're not big on futility," Nella added. "We prefer results." The air crackled with tension, and for a moment everything was poised on the knife's edge of uncertainty. Then, as if some cosmic director had called action, the chaos erupted anew. The empathy weapon, now fully engaged, pushed its influence further into the Xylith systems, sowing confusion and discontent among their ranks. The leader's composure slipped, just a fraction but enough to give Arlen hope. "Looks like your house of cards is tipping over," Arlen said, voice steely with determination. The Xylith leader snarled, a sound that promised retribution and suffering. "This is not over." "Maybe not," Arlen conceded, "but it's a hell of a start. With that, the confrontation escalated in a flurry of chaos and defiance. Arlen and his team, bolstered by their small victory, fought with renewed vigor. The tide of rebellion spread, fueled by a weaponized empathy that had turned the Xylith's own control against them. The chamber became a battlefield, the stakes as high as the tension in the air. Arlen's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline a heady cocktail that sharpened his senses and fueled his resolve. "Stick together," he shouted, voice barely audible over the din. "We've got them on the ropes." The Xylith leader, now fully embroiled in the conflict, fought back with a desperation that was almost admirable. Almost. In the midst of the chaos, Arlen found himself face to face with the leader once more, their gazes locking in a silent battle of wills. "Humans are relentless," the leader spat, his voice tinged with grudging respect. Arlen's smile was all teeth and defiance. "We're also damned hard to get rid of." The battle raged, a cacophony of noise and fury that echoed through the corridors. But amidst the chaos, a new dynamic emerged, a sense of unity among the captive species, a shared fight for freedom against their oppressors. Arlen felt a surge of pride, tempered by the reality of their situation. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they had something the Xylith would never understand, a reason to fight, a bond forged in adversity. As the Xylith forces began to falter, the tide turned decisively in favor of the rebels. The empathy weapon had done its job, sowing discord and disarray among their captors. And now, with the odds tipping in their favor, Arlen knew they had a chance. A slim, improbable chance, but a chance nonetheless. "Time to finish this," he said to his team, voice grim with resolve. They pushed forward, determination burning in their veins like rocket fuel. The Xylith leader, now isolated and vulnerable, was a symbol of the crumbling regime they opposed. The final confrontation was a blur of motion and adrenaline, a test of wills and wits that left no room for doubt or hesitation. Arlen fought with everything he had, driven by the knowledge that this was their moment. In the end, it was teamwork that won the day, a coordinated effort that leveraged their strengths and exploited the Xylith's weaknesses. The leader's defeat was as inevitable as it was satisfying, a testament to the power of resilience and rebellion. As the dust settled and the chamber fell silent, Arlen surveyed the scene with a mix of relief and exhaustion. They had done it. Against all odds, they had turned the tide. "Looks like we're still kicking," Murren said, his grin as irrepressible as ever. "Speak for yourself," Nella replied, though her eyes shone with triumph. "I feel like I've been through a meat grinder." Zurich, ever the pragmatist, regarded them with a tentacled approximation of approval. "A most remarkable display of human tenacity." "High praise," Arlen said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Let's just hope we can keep it up." They stood together, a ragtag group of rebels who had dared to challenge the status quo. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. They had made their mark, left their imprint on a universe that would never be the same. "Time to clean up this mess," Arlen said, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "And maybe grab a drink," Murren suggested, ever the optimist. Arlen chuckled, a sound rich with relief and camaraderie. "Yeah, I think we've earned it." They turned to leave the chamber, the echoes of their victory still reverberating through the corridors. It was a new beginning, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but it was theirs, and they wouldn't trade it for anything in the universe. The alien zoo had the ambience of a slaughterhouse after a particularly nasty day. Creatures of all shapes and sizes milled about, some dazed, others angry, most just happy to avoid becoming an intergalactic exhibit with the entertainment value of a roadkill museum. Among the chaos, Arlen leaned against a control panel, trying to catch his breath while pretending like this was all part of the plan. "The zoo's open, folks," Murren announced, scrolling through a data pad like he was browsing a menu at a questionable diner. "Free admission and everything. Don't suppose they've got a concession stand," Nella quipped, rubbing her temples as if she could press out the stress of the last few days. "Could use a drink stronger than optimism." Zurich's tentacles flicked through the control panel with the grace of a pianist, dismantling the last of the zoo's containment systems. "No refreshments here, only liberation," he chimed in, his voice as neutral as a diplomat's at a ceasefire. Arlen stood up straighter, shaking off the exhaustion that clung to him like a bad smell. "All right, time to get these folks moving before the Xylith decide to redecorate with our entrails." The ragtag team of humans and aliens began herding the newly freed captives toward the exits. It was like watching a drunken parade with none of the pageantry and all of the chaos. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" Murren asked, sidling up to Arlen with the kind of grin that usually meant trouble was brewing. Arlen shrugged, eyeing the mass of creatures. "We get them out, then we get us out. After that, maybe a nap." "Ambitious," Nella said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I thought you might suggest something crazy like saving the universe." "One insurrection at a time," Arlen replied. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." The corridors leading out of the zoo were a labyrinthine mess, but at least this time they were moving away from the Xylith, not toward them. Arlen felt a grim satisfaction as he walked past the cages, now empty, that had once held beings who knew only too well what it meant to be trapped. The empathy weapon had done its job well. The Xylith, formerly a unified front of disdain and superiority, were now more disorganized than a teenager's bedroom after a particularly energetic tantrum. Arlen relished in their downfall. "Think they'll remember this as the day they learned about empathy?" Murren asked, his tone quizzical. "Or as the day their empire of fear started crumbling," Nella added. "Either way, I'm happy to be a footnote in their history books." "Assuming they have books," Zurich interjected. "Or feet." The corridors widened into a large expanse that had once served as the main hub of the zoo. Now it was an impromptu gathering of former captives, each species sticking together in clumps like awkward cliques at a high school dance. "Okay, we're all here," Arlen announced, raising his voice above the din. "Now let's figure out how to get the hell out." The crowd's murmuring softened, eyes turning towards Arlen like he was the messiah of escape plans. It was a role he was fully unqualified for, but that had never stopped him before. "Anyone know how to fly a ship?" he asked, hoping anyone would raise a hand, or a tentacle. He wasn't picky. A few responded, though none looked particularly confident. Well, beggars couldn't be choosers, especially when the alternative was getting reacquainted with a Xylith holding cell. "Right, we'll divvy up the ships," Arlen said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We stick together, stay alert, and don't stop till we're far enough away to start worrying about things like food and fuel." "Or booze," Nella added, ever the realist. The assembled crowd began to move, a sluggish wave of varying degrees of eagerness. Arlen, Murren, Nella, and Zurich led the way, navigating through corridors that seemed less oppressive now that they were leaving them behind. "Think the Xylith will give chase?" Murren asked, falling into step beside Arlen. "They might," Arlen replied, "but they're not exactly running a well-oiled machine right now. More like a rusty bicycle missing a wheel. We'll take every advantage we can get," Nella said. "I'm not exactly in the mood to face down another alien overlord today." Zurich stopped short, a tentacle raised in a gesture that might have been a signal to halt. "Incoming transmission," he announced, his voice carrying a note of urgency. "Friend or foe?" Arlen asked, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on him again. Zurich listened to the transmission through his interface, translating the alien language with the ease of a seasoned diplomat. "It seems the Xylith want a parley." Arlen exchanged a look with Murren and Nella, both of whom looked as surprised as he felt. "A parley? That can't be good," Nella said, folding her arms. "They're not exactly known for their negotiation skills." "What do they want?" Murren asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Zurich listened for a moment longer, then looked up. "They want to discuss terms for our departure." "Terms?" Arlen echoed, skepticism lacing his voice. "Sounds like a trap." "Chances are they're desperate," Nella suggested. "Empathy's not their strong suit, and now it's biting them in the ass." Arlen considered their options, none of which were particularly appealing. "All right, let's talk to them. But we're keeping our guards up, and if things start smelling fishy, we're out." The group moved to a communications hub, a smaller room dominated by screens and controls. Xerix connected them to the Xylith leader, whose face appeared on the main screen, looking none too pleased. "Humans," the leader sneered, though there was a glint of begrudging respect in his eyes. "You have caused significant disruptions." "We aim to please," Arlen replied, leaning back with an air of casual disdain. "What do you want?" "Your departure," the leader said, his voice a mixture of irritation and resignation. "We are willing to permit it should you agree to certain conditions." "Such as?" Murren asked, looking at the leader with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for bizarre art installations. The leader hesitated, clearly unused to negotiating with what he considered lesser beings. "You will leave peacefully, without further interference in our affairs." Arlen chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Considering you're the ones who kidnapped us, I'd say you're in no position to dictate terms." The leader's eyes flickered with anger, but he composed himself. "And yet here we are." "Here's the deal," Arlen said, leaning forward. "We leave and you forget we were ever here. In return, we won't come back with more empathy weapons." The Xylith leader considered this, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Agreed. But know this, human, we will not forget this day." "Neither will we," Nella added, her voice carrying a note of finality. With the terms set, the communication ended. Arlen rubbed his chin thoughtfully, feeling the weight of their decision. "Think they'll stick to it?" Murren asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "They better," Arlen replied. "But at least it buys us time to get out of here." Xerix deactivated the communication system, his tentacles moving with a kind of calm efficiency that belied the tension of the situation. "We should depart while the window of opportunity remains open." "Right," Arlen agreed, feeling a sense of urgency propelling him forward. "Let's get these folks to their ships and out of this hellhole." The final exodus from the zoo was more organized than Arlen had expected. Maybe it was the shared sense of relief, or perhaps it was the knowledge that they had made the Xylith sweat for once. Either way, it felt good. "Feels like the end of a long, bad movie," Murren said as they walked, a grin tugging at his lips. "One without sequels, hopefully," Nella added. They reached the docking bay, a space filled with ships of varying sizes and designs. Arlen gestured for the crowd to board, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "Okay, folks, show's over," he announced. "Let's not hang around for the encore." The group dispersed, boarding their designated ships with an efficiency born of desperation. Arlen watched them go, feeling a sense of satisfaction that was tempered by the knowledge of how close they'd come to failure. "Think they'll be all right?" Murren asked, standing beside him as they watched the ships prepare for departure. "Let's hope so," Arlen replied. "We've given them a fighting chance." Xerix rejoined them, his presence a reminder of the strange alliances that had formed during their ordeal. "The Xylith's hold on this place is broken, but they will not forget." "They'd better not," Nella said, her voice a mix of challenge and defiance. "Next time we'll bring more than just empathy." With the last of the ships departing, Arlen turned to his team. "All right, let's get ourselves out of here. I'm overdue for some R&R." They boarded their own ship, the engines humming to life with a reassuring rumble. As they lifted off, Arlen cast one last glance at the alien zoo, now just a blip on the radar of their lives. "Think we made a difference?" Murren asked, breaking the silence that had settled over them. "Maybe," Arlen replied, adjusting the controls. "But at least they'll think twice before messing with us again." "Here's to small victories," Nella said, raising an imaginary glass. Xerix, seated beside them, added his own observation. "Every journey begins with a single step, even one as fraught with peril as ours." Arlen smiled, feeling the weight of their experience settle into a place where it could be a source of strength rather than burden. They were free, and for now, that was enough. As the ship soared away from the Xylith's domain, Arlen allowed himself a moment of hope. Their adventure was over, but the possibilities of what lay ahead stretched out before them like a new frontier, waiting to be explored. "Let's find out what's next," Arlen said, his voice carrying the promise of future battles and unknown adventures. "Bring it on," Murrin replied, the words a challenge and a promise rolled into one. With that, they set course for new horizons, leaving behind the chaos of the alien zoo and stepping into a future of uncertainty and potential. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, armed with nothing more than their wits, their resilience, and the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, the underdog comes out on top.